Rabbi, what's the proper greeting for Rosh Hashanah? While my actual answer to this congregant would be short and sweet, here's a preview of the internal thought process. So the proper greeting, capital T, the, doesn't really exist. Do you really think we Jews agree on anything unanimously, let alone a holiday greeting? I could give a lot of options here, something short and easy perhaps. I should probably just say, Shana Tova, a good year. But should I tell them to add the li beforehand to make it a more complete phrase, Lishana Tova, to a good year? I could even recommend adding umitucha to the end, making it a good and sweet year. But while more traditional, that Hebrew might be getting a little hard, especially for a non-native speaker. Yiddish. Can't go wrong with some good old Yiddish, right? There's good Yontif, but that gets turned into good Yontif, which is fine if you like mixing languages, or there's these other Yiddish phrases, but I'm not even 100% sure how to pronounce them, so nope. Maybe they want to show off that they do know Hebrew and traditional phrases. Our machzor includes, and is a tongue twister for most at the end, L'shana tova tikatevu v'tichatemu. That's a mouthful. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year. Or you could even go with kitiva v'chatima tova, a good inscription and a sealing in the book of life, if that theology is your thing. We're all adding a little Sephardic flair this year with Rosh Hashanah Seders, so we could go with Tizku l'shanim rabot, may you merit many years. And then I could, if this would be funny, I could tell them to do an informal survey of who correctly responds ne'imot v'tovot, that they should be pleasant and good ones, who utterly muddles the Hebrew phrase because they have no idea what you just said, or who just stares at you blankly. I'm an educator. I could also teach them that Chag Sameach, which you'll hear, a happy holiday, is really better suited for the 3 pilgrimage festivals, but then you'd probably ask me what those are. And it's not really wrong to use at Rosh Hashanah. And then perhaps the voice of doubt would enter my mind. Are any of these answers right for this Rosh Hashanah, this Rosh Hashanah in 2020? To wish a good year and a sweet year amid the adventures of 2020 thus far just doesn't feel completely right. This year does not seem lined up for the adjectives good and sweet. So maybe we need a different greeting this year. Maybe something new. Maybe it's like when my classmates and I in rabbinical school developed code for, I'm in a really rough spot and don't feel like today will be a good day. And so instead of greeting or responding to a greeting with the Hebrew for good morning, we'd use the phrase for a new morning, boker chadash. That seemed more honest. So maybe this year I should tell people to wish one another L'shana chadasha, to a new year, a clean slate, a year to be different than the last year, than these last 9 months with a pandemic and everything else. But no, we don't need to. Let's stick with L'shana tova umituka. And let me explain why, even amid this pandemic, the civil injustice and unrest, the politics of a presidential election year, the wildfires, the other natural disasters, murder hornets, apparently a meteor coming our way, according to that one Facebook article, and all the other stuff that I think at this point I've forgotten about, there's no need to change the greeting. So we start with L'shana. If I can say anything for certain after the last 8 months or so, 5781 will be a year. I don't own a crystal ball, but if I were a betting person, the year ahead is not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. But is any year really without its challenges? And note here that I added the li, and that should actually be on that side. I added the li because shana is year. Li shana is to a year, for a year. Essentially, may it be a year. Much like we'd say li chaim, to life, to make a toast, and not simply chaim, the li implies hope for the future. Li shana, to a year, that we may see the end of this year. Li shana, with hope that we will be together next year. Li shana, that maybe next year there will be a little less going on in our world to try to narrow down a sermon. This year in particular, we must have hope that we'll all be able to say these words to one another again next year, and God willing, may it be back in person in the Great Hall. For us to be able to say Lishana is to create a vision for a future, even if we might not be so clear on what that future will look like right now or how we're getting there. And then we add the word tova. May it be a good year. It's not just about surviving the next year. May we thrive, may we grow. My cynicism might tell me that can we honestly wish a good year among all these challenges? That's kind of where I started this whole sermon. It feels like everything we have been dealing with is still among us. But to add tova is to say, may we find the silver linings. No year is without challenges. Maybe we've spent some more time with those in our innermost circles. Maybe we've reconnected with old friends and distant family with regular video calls. Maybe that project around the house is finally getting done. Maybe you don't have to wake up as early without a commute into work. Or maybe you don't have to stay up as late finishing your homework that's due the next morning. Maybe you picked up a hobby or learned something new. Who knew canceling professional sports would lead to this much sourdough bread? Maybe you took a little extra time for yourself or what matters most to you. Any year, Lishana Tova doesn't mean we think the whole year will be all sunshine and rainbows. But we know they'll be in there. This year, may we still be able to see them amid and perhaps despite the challenges. And then we add the last word, umituka. And I might be covering up my Hebrew, but that's okay, you get the idea. Lishana tova umituka, to a good year, to a sweet year. This phrase always seemed redundant to me as a kid, and I didn't always like adding it, probably in part because I never quite knew what people were mumbling as they moved on to the next person, but I digress. One question the rabbis in our literature always seem to ask is, why did somebody need to say this? Why did this need to be written? Isn't it redundant? Didn't we learn it somewhere else? And then they have to figure out what is unique. What's the new teaching that comes from the statement they're arguing about? Because God forbid a rabbi speak beyond what is strictly necessary. So let's apply that kind of thinking to our high holiday greeting. What does umituka come to add that we didn't already talk about in Lishana Tova itself? To be good, to be tova, is to be moral, righteous, generally approved of. My day might be considered good if I generally like other days to be similar to it. It may not be great, but it wasn't terrible either. I could have an experience that is good mixed with bad, but perhaps the bad doesn't taint the whole day. But sweet, mituka, sweet comes with a connotation of pleasant, delightful. During creation, God deems creation good, not sweet or delightful. But Shabbat, on the other hand, does get described with those adjectives. Sweetness comes from our perception and our experience of what is good, not necessarily from the thing itself. Shabbat is an experience. Creation is a thing. Sweetness implies enjoyment of the experience, to seek out joy this year when our brothers and sisters are struggling in so many ways. Seems selfish, but we must. We must not only look for the good, but permit ourselves to enjoy it. Doing so will not negate the crappy parts of our own or others' experiences. It won't make them go away, but we don't have to let them be our only emotions. There's a teaching that a wicked man is speaking to a righteous man and says that the righteous man should be thankful for his wicked actions, for the wicked person's actions. For if he, the wicked person, were not called wicked, the other, the righteous man, would not be called righteous. When we only have one set of experiences, we don't always recognize them, good or bad, sweet or unpleasant. But when we have a spectrum of experiences in front of us, we're better able to recognize the good and sweet from the bad and bitter. Psychology shows us that people are actually happiest when they allow themselves to have a full emotional experience. To be happy all of the time doesn't actually make you happy, but to feel sadness, pain, and anxiety, and also feel happiness, joy, and excitement, that makes us whole, and that makes us perceive ourselves as happier. It's not hard to see the negatives in our current situation. It's not hard to look at the year ahead and wonder how we're going to brace ourselves for whatever is going to come. But we can allow ourselves to experience more than just the anxiety and fear and unsettledness that our world is bringing us right now. And as Rabbi Bodney Hallis talked about last night, we don't have to let ourselves become stuck. And so I'll conclude by wishing you wholeheartedly the traditional greeting, Lishana Tova Umituka, to another year, to a good year, to a sweet year, and that we may all join together in person again soon. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.